Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 5. The Entered Apprentice degree continued. From Symbolism of the Three Degrees by Oliver Day Street. Part 1. The Entered Apprentice. The Bible. The Bible is one of the great lights, is one of the items of furniture, and rests upon the top of the two parallel lines. No lodge with us should be opened without its presence. Still, it is but a symbol. It represents divine truth in every form, whether in the form of the written word or in that referred to by the psalmist when he sings, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge." Psalms 19:1. But the shadow must not be mistaken for the substance. There is nothing sacred or holy in the mere book. It is only ordinary paper, leather, and ink. Its workmanship may be much inferior to that of other books. It is what it typifies that renders it sacred to us. Any other book having the same signification would do just as well. For this reason, the Hebrew Mason may with perfect propriety use the Old Testament alone, or the Mohammedan may, as has been done, employ the Quran in his lodge. In fact, that book should be used which the individual in question most fully represents divine truth. We are quite well aware that many Masons and a few Grand Lodges maintain that Masonry requires of its initiates a belief in the teachings of the Bible. If these brethren are correct, then a belief in some part alone is not exacted, but a belief in every part, both of its history and doctrine. Once concede that any exception can be made, and their whole contention falls to the ground, because it then becomes the right and duty of every Mason to decide for himself what is required and what is not. So let us assume that belief in every part is required. It is necessary, therefore, in any case only to ascertain what the Bible teaches, to know what Masonry requires. We quickly find that, in the opinion of some, the Bible teaches that man fell from a state of perfection in which he was originally created into one of corruption from physically eating a forbidden fruit. But at the same time, we find that others equally honest believe that this story is an allegory, and each side supports its contention with eloquence, learning, and zeal, not to say warmth. Which view does Masonry demand that we believe that the Bible teaches? Some believe the Bible teaches that because of man's sinfulness, the whole world was covered by a flood. Others again believe that this too is an allegory. Which does Masonry require us to believe? Is one who is skeptical as to the reality of such a flood ineligible to Masonry? The Bible teaches most explicitly, as at least many think, that Jesus of Nazareth was the Son of God, that his conception was immaculate, that he was born of a virgin, that he was crucified, was dead and buried, that he lay in the tomb 3 days, that he descended into hell, that he arose from the dead, that he ascended into heaven, that he now sits at the right hand of God, that at the last day he will come to judge the quick and the dead, that through him and him only can man be saved to a future life of happiness. The Jew, the Hindu, the Parsi, the Mohammedan, the Chinaman, the Japanese do not believe any part of this. Are each and all of these barred from Masonry? The primitive Baptist believes that the Bible teaches that foot washing is a duty. Other churches think not. What does Masonry say? The Baptists and others believe that the Bible teaches a single mode of baptism, immersion. Others think it teaches not only this, but sprinkling and pouring. With which does Masonry agree, or rather require its members to agree? Some believe that the Bible teaches that the resurrection is a resurrection of the flesh. Others that it teaches that the resurrection body is a spiritual body. What does Masonry think it teaches? Or rather, which does it require its devotees to believe that it teaches? Roman Catholics believe that the Bible teaches that the Pope of Rome is the vicegerent of Christ upon earth, that he can grant indulgences and forgive sins. Others ridicule these ideas. What says Masonry? Maybe the brethren and Grand Lodges to whom we refer will counter by saying Masonry does not descend to particulars, but only requires its initiates to believe those fundamental teachings of the Bible concerning which all good men agree. Some have actually tried to dodge in this way. When they do they abandon their original position, which was that they believe that all the teachings of the book is required? We dare assert that neither the constitution, regulations, nor ritual of any Grand Lodge in the world requires a belief in the teachings of the Bible, unless it be the Masonry of Scandinavian Europe. When we say that the Bible is the rule and guide to our faith, we mean that what it typifies, truth, should be the rule and guide to all our beliefs, thoughts, words, and actions. Some Masons and Grand Lodges, notably Tennessee, insist that one, to be entitled to recognition as a Mason, must specifically acknowledge God's inspired word, or, as one distinguished Mason expresses it, a Mason may believe as he pleases, so long as he believes in one true and living God and accepts the Holy Bible as his divine teachings and his revealed will. These brethren thus broadly commit themselves to the Christian doctrine of inspiration of the Bible. Would they compel Jewish Masons to believe this of the New Testament? Jews do not even believe that all of the Old Testament is inspired. But a further question is, what theory of inspiration would they compel belief in? 1. That of mechanical dictation or verbal inspiration, or that of dynamic influence or degrees of inspiration, or 3. That of essential inspiration, or 4. That of vital inspiration. For theologians have contended for each of these. Do these zealous brethren recognize Thomas Aquinas' distinction between direct and indirect inspiration? Are the Hebrew Masons to be allowed to accept the descending scale of inspiration taught by the Jewish rabbis, namely superintendence, elevation, direction, suggestion? Anyone who will make a little study of this doctrine of inspiration will soon realize on what treacherous sands of theological dogma Masonry will find itself should it ever attempt to enforce belief that the Bible is the inspired word of God. There is but one escape from this jungle of dogmatism, and that is frankly to acknowledge the Bible to be a symbol only. Those Christian Masons who would enforce belief in the teachings of the Bible have simply mistaken the symbol for the thing itself. The Bible is Masonry's adopted symbol of divine truth in every form, just as the compasses are its adopted symbol for self-restraint, the square of morality, and the scythe of time. The Bible symbolizes that divine truth or knowledge, from whatever source derived, which should always be the rule and guide both to our faith and conduct. Thus viewed, there is no reason why any man, whatever be his faith, should object to the Bible on the altar or to be obligated on the Bible. On the other hand, there is no reason why a candidate may not be obligated on that book which is to him the most sacred, the Bible being displayed the wall precisely as are the square and compasses. Apron. We are told that the lambskin or white leather apron, the badge of a Mason, is more ancient than the golden fleece or Roman eagle, more honorable than the star and garter. This sounds a little bombastic, we must admit, yet it is literally true. The Order of the Gold Fleece, which is here referred to, had its origin in AD 1429. The Roman eagle, which was Rome's insignia of imperial power, became distinctly such, according to Pliny, no earlier than the second consulship of Gaius Marius, or about 105 years BC. On the other hand, it is certain that the apron was worn as a badge of honor or sanctity more than 1,000 years before Christ. The garter is confessedly the most illustrious order of knighthood in England, and is historically identified with the chivalry of the Middle Ages. But for this very reason, it, like all the other orders of chivalric knighthood, was, as has been said by high authority, George Gordon Colton, hampered by the limitations of medieval society. Edward A. Freeman, the great English historian, who has perhaps most nearly defined the spirit and influence of knighthood, says, "The chivalrous spirit is above all things a class spirit, The good knight is bound to endless fantastic courtesies towards men and still more towards women of a certain rank. He may treat all below that rank with any degree of scorn and cruelty. The spirit of chivalry implies the arbitrary choice of one or two virtues to be practiced in such an exaggerated degree as to become vices, while the ordinary laws of right and wrong are forgotten. The false code of honor supplants the laws of the commonwealth, the law of God, and the eternal principles. Chivalry, again, in its military aspect, not only encourages the love of war for its own sake without regard to the cause for which war is waged, it encourages also an extravagant regard for a fantastic show of personal daring which cannot in any way advance the siege or campaign which is going on. Chivalry, in short, is in morals very much what feudalism is in law. Each substitutes purely personal obligations devised in the interest of an exclusive class for the more homely duties of an honest man and a good citizen. This view presents knighthood as the very antithesis of Freemasonry. F.W. Cornish presents a somewhat brighter picture of knighthood, but says, against these virtues may be set the vices of pride, obstinance, love of bloodshed, contempt of inferiors, and loose manners. But whether we take the one or the other view, Freeman's or Cornish's, chivalry will not bear comparison with Freemasonry in the nobility of its principles. Let us sit against the pictures of Freeman and Cornish, the things which Freemasonry stands for. It is, in theory at least, a vast school, urging the study of the liberal arts and sciences, which tend to broaden, strengthen, and enlighten the mind. But it is much more than this. It is a great society of friends and brothers, teaching by precept, and let us hope by example, all those mental and moral virtues which make and adorn character and prepare us to enjoy the blessings not only of this life, but of that which is to come. Let us enumerate some of the things that are taught and, by ceremonies peculiar to Freemasonry, are impressed upon the minds and hearts of its initiates. A belief in deity, the service of God, gratitude for his blessings, reverence and adoration for his holy name, veneration for his word, the duty and efficacy of prayer, the invocation of his aid in every laudable undertaking, faith in him, hope in immortality, charity to all mankind, the relief of the distressed, particularly the brethren and their families, the cultivation of brotherly love, and the protection of the good name of a brother and that of his family, and the sanctity of his female relatives, the adornment of the mind and heart, purity of life, and rectitude of conduct, the curbing of our desires and passions, living in conformity of the great books of nature and revelation, the practice of temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice, the cultivation of habits of patience and perseverance, the eschewing of profanity, love for and loyalty to country, love of truth, devotion and fidelity to trust, the beauty of holiness, the maintenance of secrecy, the observation of caution, the recognition of real merit, the contemplation of wisdom, admiration for strength of body and character, the love of the beauty of nature and art, the observance of the Sabbath, the promotion of the peace and unity of the brethren, the preservation of liberty of thought, conscience, speech, and action, equality before God and the law, the cultivation of habits of industry, the certainty of retributive justice, the brevity and uncertainty of this life, the contemplation of death, and the life everlasting after death to those who love God and his creatures, and observe his laws. All of these things, and others we are not privileged to mention here, are taught to every candidate and are impressed upon his mind by peculiar ceremonies which constitute a part of the arcana of the lodge. Do you say that all of these things may be learned elsewhere with equal thoroughness and equal ease, and that Masonry is therefore a useless institution? We maintain not. The fact that the institution has lived and flourished for so long a period and that it is today more powerful in its influence and more general in its dissemination than ever before proves not. It approaches the mind and heart from a distance that enables it to reach and grapple many men whom no other influence can reach, while at the same time it doubles and multiplies many times the power for good of those whom other influences do not reach. It is, therefore, any exaggeration to say that Freemasonry is more ancient than the Golden Fleece, and more honorable than the Star and Garter, or any other order that can be conferred upon its initiates by king, prince, or potentate. Lamb. The lamb, as stated in our monitors, has in all ages been deemed an emblem of innocence. This symbolism is probably traceable not only to the whiteness of its wool, but also to its meek and innocent appearance. The Bible, as well as other ancient literature, is full of this symbolism. It is required that the sacrificial lamb should be without spot or blemish, that is, pure white. It is a familiar saying, and has been for ages, that the lambs shall be separated from the goats. The evil symbolism of the goat is as old as the benignant symbolism of the lamb. In ancient symbolism, the accursed goat of Mendes typified all that was evil. Among the old Greeks and Romans, the god Pan was depicted as half goat, signifying that nature was half evil. Among the early Christians, the goat became the prototype of the devil or Satan. It is not surprising, therefore, in a system like ours, employing the lamb as a symbol, that we should also find a debased trace of the goat symbolism, and that we do in the vulgar saying that riding the goat accompanies our ceremonies. Of course, this is no longer believed by anyone, but is probably a transference to Masonry by its enemies of the old belief that the witches employed the goat in their ceremonies. White. The colors which figure in the symbolism of the first 3 degrees are white, black, and blue. The symbolism of white is obvious, purity or innocence, and it bears this signification in all the degrees and has bore it at all times and among all peoples of which we have any knowledge. To the Jew, the Egyptian, the Greek, and the Roman, to the savage, the barbarian, and the civilized man, it has bore this same meaning. All literature, ancient, medieval, and modern, is rich with symbolism. The Bible is full of it. As emblems of this purity and innocence, we employ white gloves, white sashes, white rods, and white aprons. Black with us is a symbol of death and an emblem of mourning. Its symbolism is as obvious and as universal as that of white. At the funeral of a brother, the deacons carry black rods, and the white rods of the stewards, all the furniture carried in the procession. The musical instruments and the Bible are all draped with black. In token of our sorrow, we wear a small black ribbon on the coat lapel and drape the lodge in black. Blue symbolizes universal friendship and benevolence, but its symbolism is not as obvious and uniform as that of black and white. To different peoples and at different times and in different degrees of Masonry, it has different meanings. It is, however, distinctly the color of the first 3 degrees, and they are, in consequence, known as blue Masonry. Its symbolism of universal friendship and benevolence, it is supposed to derive from the all-embracing nature of the blue vault of heaven, which seems to comprehend within its sweep all the visible universe. Blue has a warmth about it, which makes it a peculiarly appropriate emblem of that warmth of feeling that goes with friendship and benevolence. Gloves. The apprentices to operative masons have always worn gloves to protect their hands in the handling of the undressed stone. 200 years ago, and probably even later, it was the custom of the Freemasons in England to present the entered apprentice candidate with white gloves in much the same manner and with like symbolism as they then, as we now, present him with a white apron. This ceremony is still preserved on the continent of Europe, and though the ceremony is abandoned in both England and America, it is still common in England for masons in all degrees to wear white gloves. They symbolize the same purity of life and rectitude of conduct as does the apron. Yet, on the mistaken assumption that entered apprentices and fellow crafts did not wear gloves in the time of King Solomon, the Grand Lodge of Alabama recently made an appropriate change in its master's degree. Let us hope that this mistake will be speedily corrected. Definition of a lodge. We are told that a lodge is a certain number of masons duly assembled with the Holy Bible square and compasses. These three properties should indeed always be present, but to the existence of a lodge, in its highest sense, it is more necessary that there should be present what they symbolize, namely, truth, virtue, and self-restraint. Without these, there may be a semblance of, but no real lodge. Bible square and compasses should be displayed in every open lodge, not chiefly for their own sake, but for what they represent. High heels and low Vales. We are told that our ancient brethren usually held their lodges on high heels or low Vales. This allusion to this custom of antiquity is another hoary lock upon the brow of our symbolism. The explanation given is a very simple and practical one, namely, because they better lent themselves to purposes of secrecy. But there is another and deeper reason. Whatever may be the explanation, it is clear that from the remotest times, hills and valleys have been peculiarly venerated by mankind. On the high places, the Jews and their neighbors worship God. The glens and dells our imagination has polluted with the charming little people, the spirits, the nymphs, and the fairies of mythology. And our nursery tales, the beauty spots of the earth are where mountains and valleys succeed each other in greatest profusion. These are they that in all ages have testified to the majesty and glory of God and have stirred our imaginations and inspired our poets. The Valley of Jehoshaphat figured prominently in the early Masonic rituals, but in the recent ones it has almost wholly disappeared. Still among a few old Masons, the expression lingers. In the old rituals, it was mentioned, in conjunction with high hill and low Vales, as a place where Masons held their lodges. The only mention of this valley in the Bible is in the prophet Joel 3:2-12, and is commonly supposed to refer to the deep valley lying between the city of Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives, through which flows the brook Kidron. Joel records Jehovah as declaring, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage of Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And let the heathen be awakened, and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. The meaning of Jehoshaphat in the Hebrew is Valley of the Judgment of God, or as expressed by Joel 3:14, the Valley of Decision. The foregoing passages gave rise to the belief among both Jews and Mohammedans that the Valley of Jehoshaphat would be the seat of the Last Judgment. Peculiar sanctity was, therefore, held to attach to it, and to say that a lodge was held in the Valley of Jehoshaphat was to say that it was held on holy ground. To speak of a lodge in the Valley of Jehoshaphat had much the same import as when we speak of a lodge of the holy saints John at Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy city, and hence to hold a lodge there is to hold it on holy ground. Untempered mortar. We are taught never to daub with untempered mortar, a thing indeed which the operative mason should never do. But this saying is meaningless to us unless we understand its symbolical signification. For the operative mason to use untempered mortar is for him to begin his work without proper preparation. The admonition, therefore, never to dab with untempered mortar is to teach us that we should never undertake any task without due preparation, whether that task be mechanical or mental. More poor jobs and more failures in life result from insufficient preparation than from any other one cause, if not from all other causes combined. Time spent in preparation for a given task or for one's life work in general, is not lost. It cannot be more profitably employed. It will in the years to come be found to be bread cast upon the waters. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.